Ren here, and today I'm going to be talking about the Lunar Chronicles. So I read this series back in January and was meant to do this review back in January and then just didn't. Everything just got on top and I kept doing other videos, and I did a poll on Twitter back after I finished the series and said, did you guys want individual book reviews of each book in the series or one big series review? And the result was one big series review. So because I knew I was going to sit down and discuss the whole thing, I knew it would take a while. So I just kept putting it off, but I really want to talk about this series. It's one of my favourite series. I read it for the first time this year and I absolutely loved it. The first book that I read in 2017 was Cinder, and it was the first series of 2017, and it was just a fantastic way to kick off my year and my reading year, so I thought it would be good to have this whole video discussing the series and why I liked it and everything. So I am going to go into spoilers, but just before the spoilery section appears, I just want to talk about why I really love the series. If you guys have been following me for a while, you will know that I absolutely love retellings. I love seeing more information and different opinions and different takes on a world and characters and on a story. So when I first heard of the Lunar Chronicles, I knew it was definitely going to be up my street. For those who don't know, the Lunar Chronicles is a series of novels set way in the future. That is so far in the future they've actually been able to colonize the moon. There are people called Lunars who live on the moon, and it is about a girl called Cinder who lives in New Beijing. She's part human, part cyborg, kind of similar to prosthetic limbs, but they are cyborg and they kind of things are altered in their brain as well. And then lots of stuff goes down and she kind of figures stuff out about where she came from and what happened to her before she was part cyborg, and it's everything unfolding. Cinder is a retelling of Cinderella, and that is the name of the first book. The second book in the series is called Scarlet, and that is Little Red Riding Hood. The third book is called Cress, and that is Rapunzel, and the fourth book is called Winter, and that is Snow White. There is a novella book which is called Fairies, which is about the evil queen Lavana, and then there is also a book of short stories called Stars Above, which is stories set in and after the Lunar Chronicles series. It's really good. I love the way that Marissa Meyer tells the story and how she retells it, but how she keeps those core elements of the main stories in the book, but the retelling that she's done it and how she's made it so different but also the same. And I just love how she was able to take these characters and make such an amazing world and such an amazing series and just give them such an amazing story. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. I cannot recommend this series enough. It is honestly one of my favourite series now. It is up there in the top 10. I had such a good time reading it. It was so enjoyable. I couldn't put it down. It was making me want to just read, and I loved it so much. So this bit has gone good spoilery, so I don't want to spoil it. So if you do not want to be spoiled for the Lunar Chronicles, then do leave now. I will put up a picture of the book that I'm talking about, so if you have read maybe the first couple but not the last ones, then you know you can watch what I talk about for the first ones and then leave when I talk about the later ones. So I'll put a picture of which book I'm talking about when I get spoilery for that book, if you'd like to stay to talk about the books you've actually read. So starting with Cinder, I really love this book. I thought it was a really good introduction to the world. I love how she stayed true to the Cinderella story. We have obviously Cinder, who is essentially, she's treated very differently because she is part cyborg. She is essentially the servant to her evil stepmother and her stepsisters, and I actually really liked that Peony was nice and that she had a stepsister that she could actually confide in and talk to and who she considered a friend. One of my favourite things when I was little was watching Cinderella too, because one of the stepsisters actually befriends Cinderella in that one and becomes a lot nicer and learns from her mistakes and the way she treated her, and I always used to like that when I was a kid, so I really liked that that was something that was in this book as well. I loved just the little elements that kept the story true, so how her losing her foot was like losing at the ball was like losing the shoe, how the car was like the pumpkin, and how kind of she was running on lost time, and I thought it was really clever because it was so subtle, like little things like the car and stuff, but was so effective at keeping that original Cinderella story. And obviously we also had the whole lumatosis epidemic with all of this illness. We see how people treat people when they get sick, and it kind of shows how people act in the face of fear and when they're really scared, their behaviour towards other people. I loved Aiko, I was reading it as Aiko. I absolutely loved her. She was kind of like the little friends, like bird and mice friends that Cinderella has in the actual film. She was there for her, she could confide in her, she could talk to her, she could help her. And I just loved Aiko's progression throughout the whole series. She is so funny and just she really makes me laugh, and I just really loved her character. The books were just so more amazing with having her there and having her influence and her impact on Cinder's life, which I just love so much. Also, there were little things in this. We meet the doctor, the one that's helping Cinder and telling Cinder that she's part Lunar. I kind of saw that coming. I thought that was a little bit predictable that Cinder was going to end up being Lunar, and then I kind of guessed that she was going to be the princess. Like, that was a kind of very obvious thing that I kind of clocked kind of probably about 100 pages in, but I don't think it ruined my enjoyment of the book. I still really enjoyed it, but I knew it was coming, so when I was waiting for Cinder to find out, I was just like, come on now, like, I know that what's going on here. And also Cress was in this. When Cinder talks to that girl on the little port screen, that is Cress, which was really cool because it was kind of a little thing as to what's to come. And I just love how Marissa Meyer has dropped little hints into how the future characters are going to tie in and how they're going to link, which I just think is really clever. I love the scene at the ball. The thing with Lavana is she's one of those kind of villains, but also one of those rulers of a place who just can't be reasoned with, and I think that's kind of what made her so scary. There were things she wanted and she wasn't willing to negotiate anything else, and Kai had to do what he had to do, and again it's kind of what people do in the face of fear. Kai has left this whole kingdom when his dad died prematurely and he doesn't really know what he's supposed to do. I like the fact that Kai was not a perfect character and he wasn't this kind of really perfect guy. He was flawed and he acted in ways that he didn't agree with and that other people didn't agree with, and I really loved his character. I thought he was really good. Then obviously we have the big climax at the ball at the end, which was really good. I really liked that scene. Cinder was really badass. Obviously Kai, I was just sort of shouting at the book, like, he doesn't actually care that you're so... Like, she felt so bad and she was just so worried that he just didn't want anything else to do with her, but obviously you could see he does, and it was more kind of that he thought she'd lied to him. That whole scene was just amazing. Like, it was such a good climactic scene. It was just so good, and her, like I said, running off and her foot being the shoe and just that whole bit, I really liked it. It was such a good ending. It was such a good cliffhanger ending, and I was so excited to jump into Scarlet after reading that book. Like, I was just so excited. I thought it was brilliant. Then obviously we have Scarlet. I did really enjoy Scarlet, but I think it was probably one of my least favourite of the series. I really liked it and we met some really good characters, but I feel like sequels, they've always got a lot to live up to, if that makes sense, but I still did love Scarlet. What I really liked about this is that we got a couple of chapters just with Scarlet so that we could get to know her rather than being Scarlet, Cinder, Scarlet, Cinder. We actually got a solid chunk of the book just about Scarlet and learning about her, and we meet Wolf and we learn what Scarlet does and what Wolf is doing, and they kind of end up on this adventure, and then we go back to Cinder's story. And I really liked that because sometimes in sequels, if we're meeting new characters, it can be quite choppy and it's kind of, yes, this character we know, character we don't know, character we know, and it's very like, it's not broken up very well, but I feel like this was done really well and we got a good chunk of time to get to know and to learn about Scarlet before we jump back into the story we already knew. Also in this book, we meet Thorn, and I loved Thorn. He was so funny. He really made me laugh. I really loved his character. I just thought he was a really good addition. I loved him and Cinder's friendship. That's one of the things I loved about this book as well. There were no love triangles. There were no like, oh, is Cinder gonna end up with Thorn in this book? Because it was just never established. They were just bros, they were just friends, and I loved their friendship and how they looked out for each other and how they cared for each other and how they got so much stronger by the end of the whole series, and their friendship was just so important. I just think it was really good. I really liked the fact that there was no love triangles in this, because there easily could have been, and they're not necessary. So it was just really good to have that and to see that and to see just such a good friendship build between these two characters. I don't think Scarlet was necessarily my favourite character of all of them. I did really like her, and I love learning more about the history. We see the farm, which again plays a massive part in the later book. We learn about Scarlet and her nan and what they do, and we see Scarlet's determination and how much she loves her nan, and she knows there has been things kept from her, but she's still so willing to go and find her and to go and help her, which I really loved. And again, it keeps that kind of grandmother figure in the Red Riding Hood story and how determined Red Riding Hood is, and I really thought that came across in Scarlet's character and in the story. We also got to be in a different place. This one was set in Paris, whereas Cinder was set in New Beijing, which I thought was really cool, that we got to go to different places and we actually got to see different areas of the world within the Lunar Chronicles world. Thorn is American, so we get to hear from his perspective and to hear about America in this new future world. And that was another thing that I really loved about this series. It wasn't just set in one place. We got to see so many different areas of the world and different places, and obviously we got to see places on the moon as well and in space, which was really cool. But I really liked the fact that it was just so vast, and there was characters from different backgrounds and different stories, and they weren't all just from the same one place, travelled around with them, which I thought was really cool. And I feel like this book, like the ending of this book, was really strong. It was really action packed. I loved how they all came together and how it all worked together, and I just thought it was really good. And then we have Cress, and I actually think Cress is probably one of my favourite ones. I really love the character of Cress. Rapunzel is one of my favourite stories, and actually, like, when it comes comes to Disney films, Rapunzel's my fave. So I was really looking forward to seeing how Marissa Meyer took the story of Rapunzel and turned it into this story, and I thought it was amazing that she was on this satellite that she couldn't get out. It was an amazing way to kind of have her like trapped, and how she kind of had the one person that wasn't actually her parents but that she had to abide to, but also that they kept Rapunzel's rebellion, they kept that kind of streak in her where she wants more, she wants to escape, she does things she knows she probably shouldn't be doing or that she would be punished for, but that kind of strength and resilience and rebellion that Rapunzel has deep within her, they really kept that within her character in this, and I thought it was really cool. And little Cress, obviously she has her to keep her company, and how smart she is. She's so smart, she's a hacker, and just how intelligent she was, and her abilities were being wasted where she was, and I think you got to really see just who she was as a character, and her intelligence and her strength and her knowledge and everything she is in that first kind of couple of chapters where she's introduced, and how we get to see all of these things about her, and I just really loved her character. Another thing I really loved in this is that they all split up, and that was something that I thought was really cool, because we got to see characters that were not characters we'd seen together before be together and work together, and they were all in different situations, all in different places, and they all had to do their own thing to work together while trying to make their way back to the person they wanted to find. I really loved seeing all these different characters and their dynamics. Obviously we got to see Cress and Thorn together, which was really funny because Cress kind of had this idea of him in her head and he was not who she turned out to be. And Scarlet ends up with Sybil, they end up going back to Luna, and Cinder ends up with Wolf. And this was kind of like a long time coming as well, the ending of this book, because they kidnap Kai finally after almost an entire 2 books without Cinder being able to talk to him and tell him the truth and to explain everything to him. They finally are together again. They finally end up in the same place, and she can tell him that she's Princess Celine and explain everything, and obviously Kai is completely on board with what they need to do. He's completely on board to help them and to be a spy and to kind of trick Lavana. He wakes up on the ship after they've like knocked him out and stuff. That whole bit was really quite comical, but also very serious and very tense filled. I think Marissa Meyer writes those tense moments really well, and they definitely build up that anticipation within you. You're like, oh, something's gonna happen. I love the fact that obviously we then get Kai back in the books, because Kai was coming to all these conclusions on his own, and I was like, you're so wrong, like you're so wrong, dude. So I was so glad that they could finally talk and that Cinder could finally explain everything that was going on, and I loved his reaction, and I just really liked that bit. Then we have Winter, and Winter was really long. Like a lot happened in Winter, and there was a lot in Winter where I felt like the characters were kind of waiting around, and therefore I was kind of waiting around, which was fine, and it didn't ruin my experience of the book, but I just felt like it was very long. But it was still very enjoyable. We got to actually see it Winter, and I really loved her little like menagerie with all the animals and all the things she had to kind of represent like Snow White and the animals that she has and the animals that she can talk to. The majority of this book is set on Luna, and we get to see the Luna people, what they do. We get to see Lavana, we get to see more kind of in Lavana's where she is, where she lives. We get to see Winter and her relationship with Lavana, because obviously she is her guardian, and we get to see those kind of interactions and how Winter really feels. We meet Jason properly, and we see his relationship with Winter and how they care about each other and how he's willing to turn his back on Lavana because of Winter. We get to see how Winter acts and how things have really affected her and how her life has affected her being on the moon and being with Lavana, which I just thought was really good. And I think this book had some really good themes and dealt with some really important topics, and we got to see just how much the characters were affected by these things. Wolf became a lot worse. His kind of transformation became a lot more developed. They gave him more things and he became much more animalistic. And it was just really interesting. I think this book was kind of the big one in size and also kind of in importance, because it had just had so much to it and so many themes and so many important things and topics, and just I really enjoyed it. I really liked the scene with kind of the rebellion, the videos, and how Cinder tells everyone who she is, and it kind of reminded me of like the Hunger Games, where kind of one person starts to take that stand and one person starts to stand up and kind of fight for what's right, and then other people will start to follow. But we also see how ruthless Lavana is. But I did like that scene. I thought that was really powerful, and I loved being able to see how they started to all come together and band together to fight for what was right. And also we see a lot of Kai and Lavana, and like Kai just really makes me laugh because he just takes the mick. Like he says things to her that she just does not like at all, but he just like, he's just taking her prisoners, he doesn't care. And Cinder learns more about her powers, her ability to control minds and what the Lunas can do. She ends up kind of coming more into her lunar heritage, learning about her family, and we just we see so much more development in this book, which I thought was really, really good. I loved learning about Cinder's family, and also having Cress learn about her family as well. I can't remember if that's in Cress or if that's in Winter. That scene was so sad because her dad finally got her back, and we'd gotten to know her dad, but she'd never gotten the chance. That whole scene, finding out who her parents were, thinking that they'd given her up, and then her parents thinking that she was dead. It was just so emotional, and that final scene, that final goodbye between her and her father was just such an emotional scene. I was crying so much at that. I really loved the end of Winter. I thought it was really good, a really good conclusion. Nobody really died though. Like, as much as I love my favourite characters, and obviously I don't want my favourite characters to die, and I'd have cried so much if some of my favourite characters had died, I felt like sometimes they kind of have to kind of make it realistic, because I don't know if that makes any sense. I felt the same way with Twilight. I felt like that big fight at the end, like no one died, which is not kind of what would go down. And also a couple of other things, like I felt like the love between Wolf and Scarlet was pretty insta-love. Like, I know that he's the alpha, so he kind of has that within him anyway, but I just thought that was kind of insta-love. A little bit with Cress and Thorn, but not as much, because I feel like Cress really kind of learnt who Thorn was properly before they got together, which I think was good. So yeah, I really love this series. I read the Stars Above novellas and the last one, the wedding one. Yes, please. All of the feels, all of the feelings. I love it so much. I loved Kai and Cinder. I loved Kai and Cinder at the end of Winter, when she becomes the true ruler of Luna, and he's like, would you want to be an empress one day? It was very kind of fitting of Cinder to kind of get everything back in order and then go to where she felt like home was, and to go where Kai was, which I thought was really nice. And we got to see obviously the board meeting between her and all the rulers, and everyone was really skeptical, and she was like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I've literally just saved all your asses, so listen to me, which I just was like, yes, Cinder, you go. We got to see so many strong characters and so many strong female characters willing to do what was right, and willing to fight, and willing to know that they had to do this thing, and I just thought it was really good. I really loved it. So yes, I really liked the Lunar Chronicles. I'm sorry if I haven't spoke about absolutely everything. I wrote the review a couple of months ago, and I kind of went over it and added other things I could remember, but obviously if I spoke about every single aspect of every single one of these books, it would be 50 bajillion years long, because it is a whole series review. But if there's any other scenes that you guys absolutely loved, put them down below and we'll discuss them, and I'll discuss them with you. Before you write what it is you want to talk about, put which book it's in, so if anyone reading and wants to discuss it as well can see which book you're discussing, because if they haven't read it yet, then obviously they don't want to be spoiled. Other than that, let's have a big Lunar Chronicles chat down below. I love Cinder and Kai so much. Like, genuinely, I love them a lot. If you're new here, I make videos a couple of times a week, so if you would like to stick around and join us, then you can do that. And as usual, all my links will be in the description below if you would like to come hang out with me on other social medias. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you're doing really well, and I will see you next time. Goodbye!